Amid the ruins of a battlefield, a newborn puppy lies alone, its life fading with every passing second. No one hears it. No one stops. Until one man does, not because he's ordered to, but because of something deeper. An active-duty Navy SEAL who has learned never to ignore what others walk past. But duty calls him back. He has to leave. And what happens to that fragile life will change everything. Before we begin, please like and follow to support us. Thank you. A cold desert night pressed against the ruins, the wind dragging sand across broken walls like something searching for what had already been lost. Ryan Carter moved through it without sound. At 35, he carried the quiet weight of a man who had learned to survive long before he learned to live. Tall and powerfully built, his broad shoulders filled out a long-sleeved green tactical shirt with camouflage sleeves, matching military pants worn from use rather than appearance, and old boots that had memorized more ground than maps ever could. His dark brown hair was cut short in a strict military style, his jaw sharp beneath a faint stubble, his eyes steady, too steady for someone his age. There were no visible scars, but something in the way he scanned the world suggested he didn't need them to remember. This was just another night patrol, until the sound came. It was faint, so faint it almost felt imagined. Not metal, not movement, not human. Something thinner, fragile, a sound that did not belong in a place built for destruction. Ryan stopped. The wind shifted, carrying it again. A trembling, broken whimper. He turned slowly toward a collapsed row of concrete structures half swallowed by shadow. Every instinct he had told him to be careful. Out here, anything unusual could be bait, a trap, something waiting to be triggered. His body stayed ready even as his steps softened, controlled, deliberate. The sound came again, closer now. He moved behind the ruins, stepping over fractured stone and twisted rebar, his breathing measured, his hand resting near his belt, not reaching for a weapon, but ready to act if needed. Then he saw it. Inside a cracked drainage pipe, half buried in dust, lay something so small it barely seemed real. A newborn puppy. Its body was no bigger than his hand, coated in fine gray dust that dulled what little color it had. Its ribs rose and fell unevenly, each breath shallow, as if the air itself weighed too much. Its eyes were still closed, its ears folded, its tiny body trembling not from fear, but from cold. Ryan froze. For a moment the war fell away. He crouched slowly, watching, listening, waiting. No movement nearby, no sign of danger, no sign of anything. He scanned the area again, this time slower, wider. There had to be a mother. Dogs did not leave their young like this, not unless something had forced them to. He leaned closer, but did not touch. Not yet. His mind worked through possibilities the way it always did. Cause, effect, risk. If the mother was nearby, she might return. If he interfered too soon, he might take the only chance this animal had. So he stayed still. Minutes passed. Nothing came. The puppy let out another weak sound, its body twitching faintly, as if it was calling into a world that hadn't answered yet. Ryan exhaled slowly. He reached for the small water bottle attached to his gear. With precise movements, he pulled out his knife and cut the plastic lengthwise, creating a shallow container. He placed it carefully beside the pipe, anchoring it into the sand so it wouldn't tip. Then he broke off small pieces of dry ration from his pack and set them nearby. Not too close, not too far. A soldier's solution. Temporary, measured, enough to give something a chance. He hesitated. For a brief second, his hand hovered over the puppy. He could take it, end the uncertainty. But something in him resisted. Not fear, not doubt. Something quieter. Respect, maybe, for a system of survival that did not belong to him. If she's out there, he muttered under his breath, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. "She'll come back." The puppy did not respond. It only breathed. Barely. Ryan stood. He took one last look, committing the location to memory, not just visually, but instinctively, the way he remembered safe routes and danger zones. Then he turned and walked back toward the base. But he did not leave it behind. Inside the perimeter, under dim tactical lights and the distant hum of generators, his body returned to routine. Checkpoints, reports, movement, everything in order, everything controlled. Except his mind. It kept returning to the same image. A body too small for the world it had been left in. A sound that did not belong. He told himself it was nothing. Just an animal. Just chance. Just another moment that would disappear like everything else out here. But the thought didn't settle. It lingered. And as the night stretched on, he found himself listening, not to commands, not to movement, but to the memory of that fragile, broken sound. By morning, he had already made the decision. He would go back, not because it mattered, but because he needed to know. The sun had barely risen when he crossed the outer perimeter again, moving faster this time, his steps less measured, his focus narrower. The desert looked different in daylight, less like a battlefield, more like something abandoned halfway through being built. He reached the ruins. Everything was still, too still. The container was untouched. The food remained where he left it. And then, the smell hit him. Sharp, heavy, wrong. Ryan stopped mid-step, his entire body tightening as instinct snapped back into place. That wasn't the smell of dust, or decay from old structures. This was fresh, close, and it was coming from somewhere just behind the collapsed wall. The smell did not belong to ruins. It belonged to something that had ended recently, and had not yet been forgotten by the air. Ryan Carter did not move at first. His body locked into the stillness that had kept him alive through too many unknowns. His eyes narrowed slightly, scanning the angles again, recalculating distance, cover, possible threats. At 35, his instincts did not ask questions. They answered them before he had time to doubt. But this time, the answer wasn't danger. It was something worse. He stepped forward. The sand shifted beneath his boots as he moved past the collapsed wall, the smell growing heavier with each step. It wrapped around him, thick and sour, the unmistakable weight of decay pressing into the back of his throat. And then he saw them. Not far from where the pipe lay hidden in shadow, beneath a broken slab of concrete and rusted metal, the bodies rested. A female dog, and 2 small puppies beside her. They were still enough that the world seemed to have already let them go. The mother's body was stretched partially over her young, as if even in death she had tried to cover them, to shield them from something she could not fight. Her fur, once likely thick and dark, was dulled by dust and time, her form rigid, her eyes closed not in peace, but in finality. The 2 puppies were smaller than the one Ryan had found the night before. Their bodies curled inward, fragile and unfinished, as if they had not been given enough time to become what they were meant to be. Ryan stopped a few feet away. He did not kneel. Not yet. There was a moment, brief but heavy, where the war returned to him. Not the gunfire, not the orders, but the quiet aftermath, the kind that left things behind with no explanation and no one to claim them. He exhaled slowly. So the mother had not left. She had tried, and whatever had happened here had taken everything but one. His gaze shifted back toward the pipe, toward the small breathing thing that did not yet know it had survived something it should not have. This time, there was no hesitation. Ryan turned and moved back quickly, his steps longer now, more direct. When he reached the pipe, the puppy was still there, barely moving, its body weak but present, its breathing uneven but real. alive. He crouched and reached in. The puppy fit into his hand like something unfinished, its body fragile, its warmth almost non-existent. Its skin twitched faintly under his touch, reacting more to presence than strength. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice low, steady, almost unfamiliar to himself. The puppy made a small sound, softer than before, but still fighting. Ryan lifted it carefully, bringing it close to his chest. The heat from his body transferred slowly, like something being remembered rather than given. For a brief second, he looked back at the place where the others lay. Then he turned away. There was nothing more to do there. The walk back to base felt longer, not because of distance, but because of what he carried. His posture remained controlled, his steps measured, but something in his chest had shifted, something he did not name, and did not need to. At the outer perimeter, 2 soldiers stood guard. One of them, Corporal Jake Miller, was in his late 20s, lean and sharp-featured with short blonde hair and a permanent squint from years of desert glare. He had the restless energy of someone who joked too much to avoid thinking too deeply. Jake noticed first. "What have you got there?" he called out, stepping forward slightly, curiosity overriding protocol for a moment. Ryan didn't stop walking. "Nothing you need to report," he said calmly. Jake smirked faintly, but his eyes softened when he caught a glimpse of what Ryan was holding. "That thing even alive?" "Barely." The second guard, Sergeant Luis Ortega, older and quieter, stood beside him. In his early 40s, with weathered skin and dark eyes that rarely missed anything, Luis carried himself with the patience of someone who had seen enough to stop asking unnecessary questions. He looked at Ryan for a moment longer than Jake did, then simply said, "You're pushing it." Ryan met his gaze briefly. "I know." Luis gave a small nod. Not approval, not disapproval, just acknowledgement. Ryan walked past them. Inside the base, routine pressed in again. Orders, structure, expectation. And within that structure there was no place for what he carried. He knew the rule before anyone had to say it. No unauthorized elements inside the perimeter. Not animals. Not exceptions. Not this. So he adapted, just like he always had. By midday, under the hard, unforgiving sun of the desert, a small wooden box took shape beside the outer wall, built from scrap material, reinforced just enough to hold together. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ryan placed the puppy inside carefully, lining the bottom with cloth torn from his spare gear. The shade from the wall offered minimal protection, but it was better than exposure. The puppy barely moved, its body still weak, its breathing shallow. But now, it was not alone. Ryan stood there for a moment, looking down. Then he reached into his pack. A sealed ration, milk powder, not intended for this. He opened it anyway. Mixing it with water in the same cut plastic container from the night before, he brought it closer, dipping his fingers slightly, guiding a few drops toward the puppy's mouth. At first, nothing happened. Then, a reaction. Small, weak, but real. It tried. Ryan exhaled, almost imperceptibly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's enough." Behind him, footsteps approached. Jake again. He leaned casually against the wall, watching. "You're really doing this?" Ryan didn't look up. "Just keeping something alive." Jake let out a short breath, half a laugh, half something else. "Command's not going to see it that way." "I'm not asking them to." Jake shook his head slightly, but didn't argue. A few feet away, Luis stood in the sun, eyes scanning the horizon, but his attention flickered once toward the small box, then back out again. Silent coverage. Ryan noticed, didn't say anything, didn't need to. As the sun climbed higher, the desert pressed down harder, heat rising from the ground like a second sky. The war went on around them, unchanged, unmoved. But at the edge of the wall, in a rough wooden box, something fragile refused to disappear. And for reasons Ryan didn't fully understand, neither did he. The desert morning did not arrive gently. It came with heat already rising from the ground, as if the earth itself remembered yesterday's sun and refused to let go. Ryan Carter stood at the edge of the outer wall, his shadow stretching long across the sand, one hand resting loosely on the rough wood of the small box he had built. Inside, the puppy lay curled into itself, still fragile, but no longer as silent as before. Its breathing had gained rhythm, not strength, not yet, but something closer to persistence. It had made it through another night. Ryan did not smile. He wasn't the kind of man who reacted outwardly to small victories, but something in the way his shoulders lowered, just slightly, betrayed a quiet acknowledgement. He crouched, opening the box carefully. The puppy's body shifted at the movement, its head tilting weakly, as if trying to locate the source of warmth it had come to recognize. Its fur, still short and uneven, revealed a faint pattern beneath the dust, a mix of dark and tan beginning to emerge, though not yet fully formed. "You're stubborn," Ryan murmured, his voice low, steady, carrying no softness, but no distance either. The puppy responded with a small twitch, its nose moving faintly as if searching. Ryan reached for the small container, mixing diluted milk from his ration with measured precision. He had learned the balance quickly. Too much, and it would choke. Too little, and it wouldn't be enough. Each movement deliberate, controlled. The way he did everything, what he hadn't expected, was to be watched. She had noticed him 2 days ago. Captain Elena Vasquez stood several yards away, partially shaded by a supply structure, her posture straight but relaxed in a way that came from discipline rather than ease. She was in her early 30s, tall and slender, with olive-toned skin that had long adapted to harsh climates. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a tight, practical bun at the base of her neck, and her face, sharp, composed, carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned her place rather than inherited it. A military doctor. But more than that, someone who had seen enough broken bodies to recognize the difference between duty and choice. She had been observing in silence, not out of suspicion, but curiosity, because what Ryan was doing did not fit the pattern. Men like him, she knew the type, controlled, focused, efficient. They did what was necessary, nothing more. They did not linger. They did not invest in things that could not survive. And yet, every morning, every evening, he came back, same place, same routine, no hesitation, no explanation. She stepped closer. Ryan sensed her before he turned. His body shifted slightly, not defensive, but aware. "You've been doing this a while," she said, her voice calm, measured, carrying neither judgment nor approval. Ryan glanced at her briefly. "Long enough." Elena moved closer to the box, her gaze lowering to the small shape inside. For a moment, her expression did not change. Then, almost imperceptibly, something softened. "A newborn," she said quietly. "A few days old at most." Ryan nodded once. She crouched beside him, her movements precise, controlled, professional, but there was something else beneath it, something quieter. "May I?" Ryan stepped back slightly, giving her space without resistance. Elena reached in, her hand steady as she lifted the puppy just enough to examine it. Her fingers moved gently along its body, checking muscle response, temperature, breathing pattern. She listened, not just with her ears, but with experience. "It's stronger than it should be," she said after a moment, "given the conditions." Ryan crossed his arms loosely. "It had a start." Elena looked at him. "What happened to the rest?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted briefly toward the horizon. "They didn't make it." Elena held his eyes for a second longer than necessary, Then she nodded. No further questions. She adjusted her grip slightly, examining the puppy's features more closely now. Its ears, still folded but structured. Its jawline. The developing bone shape beneath thin skin. "That's not just a stray," she said. Ryan said nothing. Elena reached into her kit, pulling out a small, sterile swab. "I'm going to take a sample." "For what?" "To confirm what I think it is." Ryan watched, silent as she worked. The puppy barely reacted, its body too focused on simply existing. Minutes passed. Elena stood, removing her gloves slowly. "I'll run tests," she said. "Blood, tissue response, basic screening." Ryan tilted his head slightly. "And then?" She looked at him directly now. "Then we find out if you've been feeding a liability, or an asset." Ryan's expression didn't change. "It's alive." Elena allowed the faintest trace of a smile. "That's not the same thing." She turned to leave, then paused. "You should know," she added, glancing back once. "If this comes back clean, everything changes." Ryan didn't respond, but something in his posture shifted. Not hope, not yet, but something close enough to be mistaken for it. The results came faster than expected. By late afternoon, Elena returned. This time she didn't stand at a distance. She walked straight toward him, a thin file in hand, her steps measured but purposeful. Ryan stood before she reached him. "Well," Elena stopped a few feet away. "It's a German Shepherd," she said. "Purebred." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disbelief, but in calculation. "Health?" "Strong. No detectable disease. No congenital defects." She held up the file slightly. "In fact, it's better than most military intake candidates I've seen." Ryan glanced toward the box. The puppy stirred faintly, as if responding to something it couldn't yet understand. Elena followed his gaze. "This isn't just survival," she said quietly. "This is potential." Ryan looked back at her. "So what now?" Elena met his eyes, steady, certain. "Now," she said, "we ask permission." The desert did not celebrate survival. It did not soften, did not bend, did not offer comfort in return for endurance. It simply continued, relentless, indifferent, unchanged. And yet, inside the perimeter of the base, something had shifted. The wooden box was gone. In its place, under the partial shade of a reinforced supply shelter, a small designated space had been cleared. Nothing official, nothing marked, but understood. Aloud. Ryan Carter stood just outside it, arms relaxed at his sides, watching as the small shape moved unevenly across the ground. The puppy was no longer silent. Still small, still fragile in appearance, but no longer barely there. Its black and tan coat had begun to show clearly now, the dark saddle forming across its back, the lighter fur pushing through along its legs and face. Its ears, though not yet fully upright, twitched constantly, reacting to every sound as if the world had become something worth paying attention to. It stumbled forward, its steps uncertain, its coordination not yet complete, but it did not stop trying. Ryan didn't interfere. He watched. That had always been his way. Behind him, Boots approached, measured, familiar. Captain Elena Vasquez stopped beside him, her posture straight, hands loosely clasped behind her back. Even off duty, she carried herself with quiet precision, as though discipline had become part of her bones. "You could help it," she said, her tone calm, observant rather than critical. Ryan didn't look at her. "It'll learn faster if I don't." Elena followed his gaze. The puppy took another step, faltered, then corrected itself, its body adjusting instinctively. "Or it'll fail faster." Ryan's expression didn't change. "Same thing." Elena allowed the smallest exhale, something between agreement and resignation. They stood in silence for a moment. Then the puppy turned, not toward either of them, but toward a sound. A distant clatter of metal somewhere across the base, its head tilted slightly, nose lifting, body stilling in a way that didn't belong to something so young. Ryan noticed. So did Elena. "That's not random," she said quietly. Ryan nodded once. "No." The puppy resumed moving, this time more focused, its path no longer wandering but directed, even if unsteady. Elena crouched slightly, watching closer now. "You see it too?" "I do." She straightened. "It's mapping." Ryan finally turned his head slightly toward her. Too early for that. Elena met his eyes. Not for this one. Days passed. Routine returned, but it was no longer the same routine. Between missions, between briefings, between the structured demands of military life, Ryan and Elena moved through a quieter schedule. One not assigned, not ordered, but maintained with the same consistency as everything else. Feeding, monitoring, adapting. The puppy, no longer just surviving, began to change. Its movements gained strength. Its steps, once hesitant, became deliberate. It explored its limited space with growing confidence, reacting not just to stimuli, but to patterns. Sounds, smells, motion. It processed them, stored them, responded differently each time. It was learning, fast. One afternoon, under a sky bleached pale by heat, Ryan knelt beside it, holding a small piece of cloth, one he had carried briefly through the outer perimeter earlier that morning. He placed it a few feet away. The puppy hesitated, then moved, not randomly, directly, its nose lowered, tracing the ground, adjusting slightly left, then right, correcting, recalibrating. It reached the cloth. Ryan didn't react outwardly, but Elena, standing a few steps back, crossed her arms slowly. "That's not instinct alone," she said. Ryan glanced at her. "No." She studied the puppy for another moment, then spoke, quieter now. "You realize what that means?" Ryan looked back at the small animal. Its tail moved faintly, not wagging fully, but not still either. Something in between. "Yeah," he said. That evening they took it outside the perimeter. Not far, not recklessly, just enough. The desert stretched open again, wide, empty, unforgiving. But this time, they were not looking for threats. They were watching something else. Ryan set the puppy down gently. For a moment, it froze, not in fear, in processing. The wind moved across the sand, carrying with it 1,000 invisible trails, old, new, layered, overlapping. The puppy stood still, its body tense in a way that didn't match its age. Its head turned slightly, then again, its nose lifting, pulling in the air. Then it moved, not back toward the base, forward. Ryan didn't follow immediately. He watched. The puppy walked, unsteady at first, then more certain. Its path curved slightly, adjusted, corrected. Elena stepped closer to Ryan. "It doesn't know this terrain." Ryan didn't respond, because he knew that wasn't entirely true. They followed at a distance. Step by step, the puppy moved across the sand, its small body navigating something invisible but precise. Then it stopped. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. He recognized the place before the puppy reached it fully. The broken wall, the collapsed structure, the pipe, the exact location where he had first found it. The puppy stood there, still, its body facing the space where it had once been left behind. It didn't make a sound. It didn't move closer. It just recognized. Elena exhaled slowly beside him. "That's not normal." Ryan's voice was quieter now. "No." They stood there for a long moment, neither speaking, neither moving. Because what they were looking at was not survival. It was memory, and memory meant something else entirely. Ryan turned slightly, his gaze shifting from the ruins back to the dog. Decision had already formed. He didn't need to say it out loud, but Elena did. "We need to report this." Ryan nodded once. Not hesitation, not doubt, just clarity. Because this was no longer something they were keeping alive. This was something being recognized. The desert did not remember beginnings, only endurance. It erased footprints, softened edges, and carried away anything that did not know how to stay. But some things stayed anyway. Ryan Carter stood just outside the command structure, the early morning light cutting sharp lines across his uniform, his posture still grounded, as if the decision he had already made had settled deeper than thought. Beside him, Captain Elena Vasquez held a thin report file against her side, her fingers resting lightly along its edge. Not tense, not uncertain, but deliberate. They had submitted the request the night before. Now they waited. The door opened. Colonel David Mercer stepped out first, a man in his early 50s with a solid, uncompromising build and a face shaped by years of command rather than comfort. His hair, cut short and graying at the temples, framed a sharp, angular jaw, his expression controlled but never unreadable. He was the kind of officer who did not raise his voice, because he never needed to. His eyes moved from Elena to Ryan, then briefly toward the small figure behind them. The puppy stood a few feet back, no longer fragile in the way it had been, but not yet fully grown. Its black and tan coat had settled into its natural pattern, the dark saddle clear, the lighter fur along its legs and chest clean and defined. Its ears, now partially upright, adjusted constantly, picking up shifts in sound most would miss. Its posture, still young, still forming, already carried something structured within it. Awareness, Mercer noticed. Of course he did. "You're asking to bring it in officially," Mercer said, his tone even, direct. Elena nodded once. "Yes, sir. Medical clearance confirmed. No disease, no instability." Mercer's gaze shifted to Ryan. "And you?" Ryan met his eyes without hesitation. "It's not just healthy. It's capable." Mercer studied him for a moment, not questioning the statement, but measuring the man behind it. "You're not a handler," Mercer said. "No, sir." "You're not assigned to K9 operations." "No, sir." Mercer glanced once more at the dog, then back at Ryan. "And yet you're making this recommendation." Ryan didn't look away. "Yes, sir." There was a pause. Not long, but deliberate. Mercer turned slightly, looking toward the open desert beyond the base perimeter, as if weighing something that did not fit neatly into protocol. Then he spoke. "Conditional approval." Elena's grip on the file tightened just slightly. Not enough to show emotion, but enough to register it. Mercer continued. "It enters training evaluation. If it fails, it's removed. No exceptions." Ryan nodded once. "Understood." Mercer's gaze returned to the dog. "If it passes..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because what came after that was earned. Hours later, the training yard stood open under the midday sun, its wide, enclosed space marked by obstacles, scent trails, and controlled environments designed to test instinct under pressure. The puppy stepped inside. It did not hesitate. Ryan remained at the edge, arms relaxed, watching, not intervening, not guiding. That was not his role here. Not anymore. Elena stood beside him, her expression composed but attentive, her eyes tracking every movement with quiet precision. "This is where it changes," she said softly. Ryan didn't respond, because he knew. A man approached from the far end of the yard. Master Sergeant Thomas Hale, mid-40s, tall, lean, with a body that had been built through repetition rather than strength alone. His hair was cut close, nearly shaved, his beard trimmed short but rough enough to suggest he didn't care much for appearance beyond function. His eyes, sharp, pale, almost gray, moved with constant assessment. He had trained dogs longer than most men had held rifles, and he trusted very little that wasn't proven. Hale stopped a few yards from the puppy, hands resting loosely at his sides. He didn't call to it, didn't move closer. He waited. The puppy turned. It studied him, not with fear, not with curiosity alone, but with something else, something measured. Hale tilted his head slightly. Too young, he muttered under his breath, but he didn't dismiss it. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth, scented, distinct. He dropped it several yards away without comment. Then he stepped back. The yard fell quiet. The puppy stood still for a moment, its nose lifting, testing the air. The wind moved lightly, carrying fragments of scent across the space, overlapping, shifting, confusing. Then, it moved. Not directly. It adjusted. Its small body traced a line that wasn't visible, correcting itself, recalibrating as it moved forward. Its steps were not perfect, but they were not random. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. The puppy reached the cloth, stopped, sat. Hale didn't smile, but something in his posture changed. Again, he said. The test repeated. Then again. Each time the puppy improved, not dramatically, not impossibly, but consistently. Its responses sharpened, its hesitation decreased, its focus held longer. Ryan watched without expression, but his attention never left the dog. Elena folded her arms lightly. It's adapting faster than expected. Ryan nodded once. Hale approached them finally, his steps unhurried. It's not trained, he said plainly. No, Ryan replied. Hale glanced back at the puppy, now standing, alert, waiting, not for command, but for direction. But it learns, Hale added. Elena spoke this time. That's enough. Hale looked at her briefly, then back at Ryan. No, he said. That's more than enough. He turned slightly, his voice carrying across the yard. Log it, he called out to no one in particular. Evaluation accepted. The puppy stood there, unaware of what had just been decided. Ryan exhaled quietly. Not relief, not victory, something steadier, something earned. Elena glanced at him. You realize what happens now. Ryan looked at the dog, really looked this time. Yeah, he said. The desert wind moved again, softer now, carrying less dust, less weight, because something that had once been left behind was no longer waiting to survive. It had been chosen. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive as thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they are quiet, hidden in the smallest, weakest cry that the world almost ignores. A soldier trained for war stopped, not because he had to, but because something in his heart still listened. And maybe that is how God works, not through perfection, but through people who choose to care when it's inconvenient, who choose to protect when no one is watching. In our daily lives, we are given moments just like that, small chances to step in, to help, to love. And those moments may not feel important, but they might be everything to someone else. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to keep these stories alive. May God watch over you, guide your path, and bless your home with peace and quiet strength.